To Cleaning Products US. Again, I'm Brian Sansoni with the American Cleaning Institute. So we're kicking off with our second session with a panel discussion on marketing to multiple generations. So our panelists who's joining us was, if you joined us for the first session, is Josh Harrison, who's the head of brand experience at RB. You just heard him really share some great insights about the user journey and design experience about many well-known brands where he's involved with, including Lysol, Airwick, and Finish. Also joining us is Sourabh Sharma. He is the head of digital marketing at Figure Out. That's a digital marketing and PR company that works across various verticals, including tech, fashion, lifestyle, and beauty. He's a seasoned marketer with a background in brand management, creative direction, digital marketing, social media, and management consulting. He's worked with a number of multinationals and small businesses. He also has a lifestyle portal known as 3FS Lifestyle, alongside a travel platform and apparel brand. He's been published in the New York Times, Allure, GCI Magazine, Yahoo, and has keynoted a number of speakers, a number of conferences, and judged at brand competitions. So we welcome both of you, Sourabh and Josh. And so the overall title here is trying to the challenge of marketing products to multiple generations. So, and let's just, obviously you have a bottle of detergent, and I don't believe detergents necessarily are marketed to senior citizens or millennials, but when it sits there on the shelf, obviously there are many different ways outside of that to promote interest, in that detergent, in the number of products. So Sourabh, let me start with you. Here we are, 2020, on the verge of 2021. What are you seeing trend-wise in the marketplace, the unique ways to market a lot of the products these attendees work for to multiple generations?
For sure. And I mean, the first thing that I would start with here is just defining these generations. I don't know if many people know, but now the biggest population demographic is actually Gen Z. They're, I think, at 26% of your overall population demographic, followed by millennials. And for definitions, by the way, Gen Z are, I believe they're the ones who are born after the 90s or after the mid 90s. So they are coming of age, they are increasing in disposable income. So a lot of my work has been focused on kind of delineating the millennials from the Gen Z. So what I see as trends, to your question, is that we are increasing, we are in an age where there is an increase of abundance of both advertisement, but as well as knowledge. And especially the younger generations, I've noticed, are more critical on acquiring this knowledge. They're more interested in knowing exactly what brands do, exactly how they either make their product, exactly how it's marketed. They're more, they're a lot more diligent in that way. And I've noticed that this is particularly the case with the younger Gen Z versus the millennials, which is almost indicative of the boomers, where they were more focused on exactly how this product works. I think in between them, with the Gen X and the millennials, we had this overwhelm of how to market it and to make it very, dare I say, frilly. But now we are at an age where they really want to know what this is, how it's made, where it's sourced, and how effectively it will work. So that's what I'm seeing as a very core trend, which I think is good news for cleaning products.
Sourabh, let me ask a follow-up question. Have you noticed or any surprises in the marketing to Generation Z as compared to millennials? As millennials have gotten a little older, and the Gen Z are just as savvy as anyone when it comes to all of these tools and channels around us. Any surprises that you've noticed maybe in the last couple of years?
plenty of surprises. I think it never ceases to surprise me. Millennials, I think, are the generation which really catapulted the whole like Instagram filters and really the perfect image. And I want XYZ gifts with purchase, and I want everything to be color coordinated, and I really want, you know, to work in the moment and to be really like, you know, almost narcissistic tendencies, dare I say. Gen Z, conversely, I've noticed, does not care for any of that. In fact, if you start offering them, which at least in my experience, a lot of beauty brands did, was this like experiential pop-ups and things, they are completely averse to it. They just are like, I want my product. I want to make sure that it is the best thing ever. And I think from a commerce perspective, the biggest trend I noticed was that Gen Z is not looking for bargains, millennials are. So anything sales related with Gen Z, which is a very big surprise and a very important learning for all of us, is that they're not looking for a bargain. They're more looking for a quality product, and they are willing to pay for it. I mean, granted, their disposable income is relatively less, but you know, it is growing with each passing year. And they really are willing to pay for something that is either produced sustainably, ethically, that is doing well for you know, the environment, or that is giving back to an organization of their choice. But more importantly, something that works. And so this is one of the key trends outside of the more you know, the more behavioral ones that I've found.
Joss, let me bring you into the conversation here. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, from the design perspective, you know, are there inherent challenges to marketing, designing products with the Generation Z or millennials in mind? You know, again, that you've observed. Can you perhaps share some perspective on that?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest challenges actually is the definition, so the conventions of how we define these user groups or target groups if we're talking about media, because based on all of the information that Sourabh's just talked about, it's pretty clear that we can group certain behaviors and attitudes into age groups, but actually the reality when you look at it is vastly complex, and there's kind of a sliding scale of some of these attitudes and behaviors between multiple generations. And so what we need to try and do as a designer is figure out how to define those needs, those requirements for the user experience, and somehow make them applicable at an industrial scale, let's say. So it's a bit like grouping according to demographic or to age. We tend to try and do it by need state, depending on the product type that you're looking for to solve a particular need. And those needs might be the physical interaction, the function that you want the product to perform, but they might equally be your attitude to that particular product category. So things like sustainability, you know, environmental awareness, might drive decision making at a much higher level for, let's say, broadly some of the younger consumers. But in actual fact, that as a big decision driver goes throughout multiple generations. It just varies in its weight, let's say, in people's minds. And so trying to figure out how to provide the most appropriate attributes that are both going to fulfill that person's need, provide them with a relevant and rewarding value exchange. And I think that's a particularly interesting point that Sourabh mentioned, is this kind of value question. You know, are people looking for bargains? Absolutely. But actually what they're looking for almost universally is value. It doesn't necessarily mean the lowest price. It means the most appropriate response or solution to my need for a cost level that I can afford. And so figuring out how to translate that need state into an appropriate value exchange is probably one of the hardest tasks, to be honest.
So we do have a question from the audience. Joss, you've talked about you know, the importance of color and how it can be, I think this might be from the previous session, but I think it's of use here. While color can be used as a brand indicator or a differentiator, if using it for a brand indicator, how do you ensure variants are differentiated?
I love this type of question cheers me up, because when you think about the ability to brand block, Typically, when you talk to the designers, you ask for this particular brand block. You say this is the color that needs to signify the brand or the category. And then you go back to them, you say, oh, hold on, I need 10 different variants. And so how are we going to differentiate between them? And color might be one of the ways to do it, but also there are other tools available. But the one thing that we tend to forget often as a user, as a shopper, as a marketer, is that if you're looking at a field of things that are similar, the fewer the things that are different in that field, the easier it is to spot them. And so if you're establishing a brand block, your varianting by color actually needn't necessarily be difficult, because it might be the only thing that changes on your pack. When you look at that shelf, the only thing that's different between the variants should be the thing that denotes the variant. Now, whether that's the color or the visual, maybe it's a fragrance visual or something like that. Pick the thing that is most important to separate your products in your portfolio, and make sure that's the only thing that differs within that range in front of the shopper at shelf.
Great. So, Sourabh, a question for you, and this is, again, back to the challenge of marketing to multiple generations. When designing a product today, are companies, are they taking multiple generations into consideration? Is it really just a focus on maybe a suspected core audience? Can you give some insights into companies that you work with, as far as product design? How are they taking multiple generations, and how are they keeping them in mind while designing products or redesigning products?
For sure. I think this comes back to what Josh said as well, that, obviously age is one element to look at. You need to look at both the demographics as well as the psychographics, and aptly target your audience. I think what it started with usually is, who is your core audience? Is that your millennial who lives in like a city, or is it like, what is their persona? I think that's the key indicator of how to design your product. And then what I've noticed overwhelmingly is that you have to make it obviously stand out on shelf, but you also have to make it stand out on mobile. So, which is a slightly different ball game, in that you can have the image of your product on your mobile phone. But what I've noticed with certain brands, especially the indie startup brands, are that they tend to differently design their product for a mobile phone. Not that the packaging is very different, but like they focus in on different elements. They'll focus in on maybe the claim, or they'll focus in maybe on just a certain element of the story or the design versus the actual package. That's what I've noticed is a bit different when targeting multiple generations, especially when they're not necessarily shopping in store, but shopping mostly on mobile, which, especially in the pandemic we're living through, has increased quite a lot. So I've seen a lot of creativity come out of how you present your product on an e-commerce store on your phone, or how it's presented like in a paid social ad, because that is now the new and kind of almost more popular touch point for your customers. So that's where I think I've seen a lot of the creative go for how it will look like eventually, because if that's the main touch point.
Marketing via mobile. Josh, any perspective to share there? It seems clearly that companies, agencies are put so much more resources and perhaps creativity into marketing along those lines. Can you maybe share some perspective from your end on marketing via mobile?
Yeah, I think we can't escape the reality that the smartphone screen is the way we start and end our day. It's the start and end of almost every branded interaction we have. And so we've got to accommodate that. Ideally, you want to create a seamless experience that moves between the digital and physical world, so that our brands don't interact with people in a non-relevant context. So if you think about as a person interacting with brands outside of our area of expertise, let's say, or our categories, we don't think about a digital journey or a physical journey. We just go about tasks that we believe we need to perform, and we're emotionally motivated to perform those tasks. And we'll use whatever's at our disposal to complete the task. So the phone or the laptop in some cases, or the tablet or whatever it might be, just is an integral part of your journey as you go about trying to solve your problems or perform your tasks. And I think if you consider that, particularly the mobile phone screen, as your first interaction with a category or with a brand, I think you start to see just how important it is. It might be the most important touch point right now, especially as Sourabh mentioned, in the current pandemic context, we're locked in small spaces, or we're certainly far less often in a physical store. And the ability to recognize a product, whether it's recognizing its function or the category it belongs to, or the brand, of course, I think is absolutely critical. And I think the point you made about I suppose, elevating the communication up the hierarchy versus the product form, visualizing on your Amazon A+ page, or maybe your Instagram feed, visualizing the benefit rather than majoring on the product itself, I think is a particularly useful technique. But of course, it's the opener to the journey. It's the thing the hook that maybe gets you to engage in perhaps the next step, which might be the purchase moment. So if you're working with Instagram or similar, that opportunity to grab someone's attention and to intrigue them with something. Let's be honest, doing it solely with a piece of packaging or the visualization of the product it's a pretty tough challenge. So bringing the benefit to life or demonstrating that you understand the user's context and their considerations. We come back to the points where I've made about personas. I'm a huge fan of personas, partly because it breaks down that barrier between brand owner and quote unquote consumer, and gives you a much easier job of getting into their shoes to understand their attitudes and their behaviors. But also because it takes that idea of some of the more traditional definitions of target away a little bit. So it moves us away a little bit from the age demographic, from the spending power demographic and those kinds of things, to things that actually are more useful in driving creative output, whether the creative output is the products, the packaging, the media comms, whatever it might be.
Sourabh, I saw you shaking your head there a little bit, and especially when Josh started talking about personas. So can you share some maybe additional insights, on this particular topic?
For sure, and I love that we're in such agreement here, both on the touch points as well as the personas. I'm also a big fan of personas because I feel like they really take away from almost the sterile quality of just, this is a demographic of this person living here, and this is like their age, and then like all millennials are the same. I think personas, are really relevant in contextualizing exactly what your customer is doing on like a general daily basis, as well as identifying what their touch points are. So with a lot of brands, both large and small, we've created personas which really track kind of the day of a customer, from what they do from when they wake up all the way till like, if they were dropping their kids off to school, or if they were living in a city where they had to like, pick up something before going to work. I think these kinds of things really are able to elevate you from the customer kind of cycle to understanding what the different touch points are of your customer, where you can reach them, whether that's an ad on a mobile phone which they start their day with, or whether it's an ad that's on a billboard on a highway that they're driving past on the way to work. So understanding, I think it just comes down to really understanding what the different touch points are where you can reach your customer, and then tweaking your design to stand out in each one of those touch points, which then takes you quite a bit beyond just your inventive package design, and into how you can communicate that, whether it's on a highway, or whether it's within a store, or whether that's on your mobile phone. Because the one thing to always remember is that every persona, every customer is generally inundated with different things, and so how to stand out, I think, is the key, is really the key to this.
So we're talking today with Josh Harrison. He's the head of brand experience at RB, and Sourabh Sharma. He's the head of digital marketing at Figure Out. So we referenced previously the pandemic, and how that has changed business and consumer and perhaps customer experiences, certainly here and now. But I'm wondering, going forward, when eventually we hopefully get out of this, do you see anything, you know, again, it's 6-7 months, you know, at least here in the US, it's been front and center for us. Anything from your perspectives, and we'll start with you, Josh, marketing, advertising, design, that this experience might change for the long term or forever, as far as, you know, marketing, communicating about digital products? You know, any particular observations just from, you know, from where you sit?
So I think as a designer, it presents a unique challenge. You know, albeit there have been similar or equivalent pandemics globally in the past, but not at a point in time when we had a structured approach to what we would now think of as design. And I think as designers, we all get into the trade because we genuinely want to make a change for the better somehow, whether it's large or small in people's lives. And, you know, that draws us into looking for challenges to solve. And I think changing people's way of living, which is essentially what we're talking about, of course, kicks off a whole raft of unique new behavioral principles as a new attitudinal paradigm around things like chemicals, things like exposure to the outdoors, exposure to other people. And I think regardless of whether we take at face value the changes that have happened already and assume they continue, or whether we also potentially factor in a kind of pushback, shall we say, for want of a better term, to return to more normal behaviors or more normal interactions, I think all of those represent a lot of opportunity for design and creative businesses to provide newer, better, more appropriate solutions, regardless of the category. You know, especially in the categories we're talking about here, cleaning, whether it's home cleaning and, you know, cleaning your other environments you exist in, your car, out and about, public transport. There are endless changes in behavior now that give us an opportunity to provide better solutions. And I think for designers, that of course is bread and butter. This is what we live for. But digitally, I think it presents an entirely other raft of opportunities, because of course our interaction with the digital sphere has probably quadrupled in the last 6 months. You know, anyone who wasn't previously living vicariously through their mobile phone damn well is now. So I think the direct accompaniment of digital experiences with physical ones is almost now a given. It has to be part of the way we think when we create our solutions. And it may not be directly solution oriented. It may not be directly linked to the experience of the product. It might be something the brand is doing aside from that, because the opportunity, the time to reach people, whether it's with a functional message or an emotional message or a societal change message, now is via their mobile phone. It is the digital platforms. So I think that the scope for change and for making positive change is vast.
Sourabh, what about you? Based on what you've observed and what we've talked about here, where the pandemic and all of the issues and challenges surrounding us might alter packaging design and marketing?
For sure. And I mean, I come from the school of thought that every challenge is just an opportunity. So I actually think that it is a great opportunity to really, I think first and foremost, enlighten and educate customers. I think overall I've seen an uptick in people wanting to learn a little bit more now about anything related to health, well-being, safety, cleanliness. So I think this is just an opportunity. And I've noticed even in verticals unrelated to cleaning, there's been an uptick in a desire to just learn something new, learn something more. So I think that is a great opportunity for brands that you know can just help them do more than just sell their product, but actually just enlighten a customer of how this can impact their their daily life, or contribute to whatever, as Josh had mentioned, a societal message, or just communicate to them that this is what our brand, our company's doing, add that human element to it. And the other uptick I've seen is that there's a great opportunity in a lot of innovation for especially in the digital space, because now that we are not or we're slightly inhibited in this in-person interaction and in-store interaction, the way you kind of try a product, the way you kind of for scented products, like smell it almost, it needs to be communicated digitally, but in a smart way. So I've seen like artificial intelligence come up quite nicely here. A lot of trends, especially in the beauty industry, which I think some of them maybe cleaning can borrow from, where they kind of try to communicate this experience to you virtually. So I've seen a lot of progress in artificial intelligence, which I think will be accelerated now even further.
Okay, so question here from one of our conference attendees. So with regards to the pandemic, with sales increasing considerably in household cleaning, what are your thoughts on whether or not a brand should advertise at this time? And Sourabh, I'll start with you on that.
I mean, yes, it is a good time for household cleaning, in that sales have grown. But again, I think here again of a typical customer cycle or their personas. While they may be innately gravitating towards your product now, I think it's still a good opportunity for you to, for you being like any cleaning brand, to really engage with them and make them almost loyal to your brand even after the pandemic is over. So while I think we are lucky in the cleaning industry right now, I don't think that should be an inhibitor to advertise or to work on marketing initiatives, because then I think, as opposed to a sales-based advertising approach, it can become one that's more communicative, that is more talking about, okay, customer segment, you are now purchasing our product anyway, but this is FYI what we're doing for the community, or this is why we're investing in like a future of whatever that may be. So I think to answer the question, yes, you should continue to advertise, but that message should be more than just the sale, since the sale is already happening and it's an opportunity to communicate your brand.
Josh, let me bring you into that question as well. Obviously, many of RB's brands are really popular, more than ever perhaps right now, and perhaps hard to find, like certain Lysol products. But what perspective can you bring on that? People will not be able to find the products, and yet you still want to be able to communicate in different ways with your consumers and customers. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this builds on what Sourabh's saying. Advertising at the moment in our categories has to be done with responsibility and authenticity. And in some cases, the responsible thing to do is to help people understand how to clean, maybe without the product if it's not available. How to ensure that their overall lifestyle is helping them to prevent infection or to avoid infection. And so I think the role of let's say communications rather than necessarily advertising has to be to take what the brand is trying to achieve for the user in the first place and authentically translate that into something useful, something meaningful, that even if the product is not immediately present, can somehow help the user to manage that particular aspect of their lives.
Great. Another question. So this one's for Josh. So how does RB transition a user to a new packaging format? Is the innovations journey the same? How does it differ?
I think it's not the same, no. The reality is that if someone has an inherent understanding of how to use a particular type of packaging, for instance, or how to recognize it or what it stands for, that's a paradigm that's established in their minds. And typically that will be for an entire marketplace or an entire user group. And so moving them to something different, something better, it requires a lot of careful thought. And so the innovation process typically will involve a significant proportion of user testing. Now, if you think about the the now famous and perhaps slightly buzzword design thinking methodology. Really all that means is empathizing with your end user to understand their requirements, ideating the possible solution, prototype it, and then crucially test it, iterate it, craft it. And I think that's the most important part of the innovation process when it comes to new product development, and particularly outside of the user's existing understanding or sort of marketplace paradigm, is to actually test it with people, observe their use, work with them to co-develop it if necessary, so that it's as intuitive as possible. And then I think we can't forget the role that the other touch points play in helping people to understand a new solution. It can't be done by the packaging alone. And so there are other media touch points that need to do some of that heavy lifting. And we come back to the point about journeys. When someone begins their journey and they're kind of in latent awareness phase, we can already be starting to help them understand that there's a different shape to recognize, or a different color to recognize, or there's a new usage profile that they should expect when they engage with the category. So I think it's more than just the packaging, but the packaging absolutely has to be innovated through a rather different process than a kind of existing product development.
Question for Sourabh. So while people attending this conference, we all love cleaning products and detergents and everything, yeah, perhaps somehow people in the outside world may not view cleaning products and detergents necessarily as sexy. So in this day and age, Sourabh, how what are there unique challenges, from someone from your expertise and what you work on in trying to promote, design, market products that are been around for a long time, different types of cleaning products? What's the inherent challenge there, and what is there a secret sauce for products like the ones we represent in this day and age to make them, well, sexy, or at least of interest, again, to multiple generations?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at luck because of the younger generations that are now, coming of higher disposable income, that are really coming of age, are actually less interested in this like sexy nature of products. That's a very millennial thing from all the research I've done. They're actually more interested in finding out what this product does. And you can see that from the success of a lot of brands that are a little bit more simpler in their designs. I'm thinking of a lot of fragrance brands, beauty brands here. They kind of have taken away the frills, and they really just communicate a benefit or a product. So I think we are generally moving into a space where, because of the abundance of information available as well, people are a little bit veering towards simple communications, innovative, like real innovations. With that said, I think it's always just down to the creativity of how to communicate your brand. Every brand has a persona too, so your brand persona, as well as just really think out of the box of how you can really jump out of the screen for a customer. So it could just be contextualizing their day in a way that resonates with your customer persona. It could just be from some very, I've seen some very innovative campaigns from even like auto brands that were talking about like just fixing a part of your car, for example, which is completely not very interesting. But it's just about being so creative that you can almost literally jump off the screen, because we have to, again, contextualize the touch points. People are being inundated by a lot of ads, by a lot of even ads on their phone, emails, any kind of marketing communication that after a certain point might blur together. So I think regardless of what your product category is, it is very important to both jump out, but also not to be so convoluted, and just communicate your benefits in a clear, simple way that are informative, but also a bit inventive. So hopefully that collectively is not a challenge, but I've seen some brands do it quite remarkably if they really stay true to what their brand identity is, what they stand for, and really just communicate that most effectively.
Yeah, I would actually add to that slightly. I think innovation is critical, because as an industry, I think we have a history of defining categories as low interest or low engagement, and it's a natural human response to want to try and categorize things so that we understand them better. We compartmentalize, don't we, as humans? But the term low interest categories, I think, is quite often assumed to be connected with home care, with cleaning, and so on. But in actual fact, we come back to the point about personas. Anything that helps you connect with your end user is really important, because then it helps you to realize that if we're asking someone to part with their hard-earned cash for even one of our products, it's not low interest, it's not low engagement, because that is their money. And I think we have to kind of remain cognizant of the fact that the things that make our products and our solutions relevant to people require us to invest. And so the moment we kind of talk about our categories as low interest or low engagement, we almost kind of squash the potential for investment in innovation and as Sourabh says, in innovative communication. You know, defaulting to certain methods of driving awareness and so on, I think is long gone. We have to ensure that we treat people with the respect they deserve for the value exchange that we want them to engage in. And I think, therefore, investment in the categories that we're talking about is a crucial part.
I completely agree that we cannot. Sorry to interrupt. I completely agree that we cannot call the category low interest, because I think it is. The good thing is these are products that are necessary, regardless. People will be buying them. So I think it's in our best interest to really elevate that. And I've seen a lot of brands like trash bags, even toilet paper, be very humorous, actually, or very interesting with the way they communicate, which actually makes you, I mean, I know it sounds funny, but which makes you want to buy that trash bag, because you're like, hey, this is so much fun. So I think just, imbuing that interest into the category alone is very important. So I completely agree.
So as we approach the end of the session, let me just ask a final question and ask both of you, Sourabh and Josh, to look into your crystal balls. So again, these are interesting times we're all in right now, but on maybe from what you're observing right now, the communities that you work with and colleagues and companies and reaching out to so many different generations of consumers and customers, do you see, are we on the verge of any new, I would say, innovative design or marketing trends that you think might be, wow, this will be a new era? Is there anything that you're maybe getting an inkling of, anything that fascinates you? I'll start it with you, Sourabh. Anything around the corner that either from a design or marketing element that you think could become more widespread?
So my general kind of way to approach this is that there have historically always been either life events or technology changes that have propelled the way marketing takes place, like marketing and design. So whether it's any natural disaster, any work event, or like the pandemic we're living in, or whether it's like as simply as the introduction of the iPhone in 2007, there's a very clear demarcation of how marketing was done pre that and post that. And then, so I think that trends are less, some can be created by us, but I think a lot of them are dictated by the way our customers engage with brands. And that is something that is not necessarily in our control. It's something we have to be diligent enough to be on top of, and also very responsive to. So let's say tomorrow a 3D interactive phone comes out, or something like a headset for VR that we can all walk around with, that is imbued into our face mask, just making it up clearly. We will have to adapt to that. So I look at it more from that perspective, that we have to be, we just have to really understand our brand and what it stands for, and then respond to how to market to an audience that is continually changing the way they live their life. So that's my default of how I look at changing trends. With that said, I do think that there's nothing I see that we're majorly on the verge of, but I do, as I think we mentioned earlier, I do see that if it's not there already, digital and like just mobile interactions for purchase and commerce will have to be at the forefront more so than ever before. And there probably will be a lot of artificial intelligence as well as virtual reality that I think will come into play here, which you can tell from the rise of like just software coming out with TikTok and like Instagram Reels and things. I mean, very quickly brands will be jumping on that to create things like that. So I think that's more where it might go like in the short term. But I think overall brands just really need to be flexible enough to understand that this is a changing marketplace that could be impacted by either something natural or something technological, and just be responsive enough to adapt quickly and not fall behind.
We'll finish with you, Joss. What are you thinking from where you sit at RB?
For me, I think it's about responsibility. So I think brands, you know, we've seen over the last sort of 10 years that brands are being scrutinized more and more. And Sourabh touched on information availability earlier. And I think the credibility and the authentic nature of brands have to be apparent, and they have to be apparent through their actions as well as their communications. So from a design point of view, this, if you apply it to our current context, I think one of the biggest things that is going to drive our considerations in design, particularly in innovation, is helping people to maintain human connections. Whether as a result of having to kind of self-isolate or quarantine or whatever, and therefore missing those human interactions, or whether to help facilitate more positive human interactions digitally. I think socially we see massive divisions everywhere, and I think that branded interactions have an opportunity to help create conduits of sort of positive interaction and dialogue between people. Now, whether that's with the brand present or whether it's enabling it to happen regardless of whether the brand is there or not. So for me, I think it's kind of the culmination of a lot of the things that Sourabh outlined in terms of sort of technology availability. Things like you mentioned virtual reality. I think actually augmented reality potentially is even more powerful, because that ability to have a direct connection with someone, perhaps through a screen, but also to add to that experience with other contextual visuals or movement, I think could help to make those connections a little bit more meaningful at a time when probably they've lost a lot of the direct human interface.
Well, gentlemen, we greatly appreciate you sharing your fascinating and forward-looking insights about marketing and design. Sourabh Sharma, Joss Harrison, thank you so much. Next up is one of our networking sessions. So just proceed to the lounge area on the online conference site, and you can just let yourself in there. Thank you all for joining us. And again, we'll see you throughout the week. Thank you again.
Thank you.